everybody, and welcome to this crazy amazing topic of the AE handoff from SDRs. I want to give a quick introduction of who's on our panel today. This is a Rev Genius event brought to you by Chili Piper, but we have some really, really good guests here that could help solve this challenge that seems to be overlooked. So right to my side, at least in my camera, is John Barros, the CEO of J Barros Sales. Top training company in the space. Below me is Amanda, the AE growth manager at Chili Piper. And then we have Ashley Gagliano, the VP of global sales at AAISP. So together we represent, and I'm Jared, I'm co-founder of Rev Genius, but I have been in sales for quite some time as well. We tried to get different people from different areas of the space to really break down this seemingly basic thing that seems to get fumbled, a handoff that gets fumbled. So how we're going to operate today is we're going to just have a conversation. We're going to talk about some best practices or why there aren't any, tried and tested rules behind it, and maybe there should be. And we want to open this up to questions from you all as well. So feel free to ask questions throughout. We'll pause to answer some of them, but we want to keep this conversational. We want to keep this fun, and we want you all to leave with a game plan of not screwing up that handoff from SDR to AE. We were talking before. How's everybody doing today? John, Amanda, Ashley?
Fabulous.
So let's just dive into it. This topic, seemingly simple. SDRs are going out doing dozens of things to get the meetings now. It's no longer just cold calling. It's no longer just cold calling and emailing. It's no longer just cold calling, emailing, and LinkedIning. There's dozens of other things, right? You're spending all of this time, all of this finesse. You have your account-based sales, like your targets are going after as an SDR, and you land it, but now you have to pass it to the AE to finish the job. Like this topic is way overlooked. There's not enough leaders or teams that think about it. Now we have to realize that the handoff isn't done until that prospect actually shows up. What are you all seeing out there with this? What could we be doing better? Let's open this up to conversation. So we want to share to y'all how the top revenue teams are doing this from a process standpoint. So where do we start? Do we start with qualification, y'all? How could we determine that we're bringing the right leads? And by we, I'm an SDR, and bringing the right leads to my AE team. Where do you think that starts?
I think qualification is super important, right? Like, not just, is this a good use of an account executive's time, but also like, are we misleading some person into thinking that this is something that would be the right fit for them or even make sense for them, to taking like 30, 45, maybe even an hour out of their day to actually take a look and have a conversation?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that it literally is all over the place from a qualification standpoint, and it all depends on pipeline too, which is kind of ironic. If an AE has a really, really solid pipeline, then they don't want anything other than the most uber qualified lead you could possibly get because they don't want to waste their time. But if the AE's pipeline is empty, they'll take a meeting with any damn person that shows up and says yes. And so I think there's a challenge here with people, reps qualifying because, some companies say, look, as long as somebody has a pulse, like go for it, right? Others say, no, it has to be all the way through. So I think the first part is defining what qualification means, MQL, SQL, whatever the hell you want to call it. But that SQL, like what are those qualifying criteria? And also, what are the guidelines to it? Because I think you need to allow some flex for some AEs to work with their SDRs to say, no, it doesn't have to have all that stuff. My pipeline's empty right now. Put me in, coach, basically. Like, give me an opportunity, but it at least has to have this baseline of qualification criteria here. And so I think that it's first and foremost defining what that is and putting some guardrails on it, and then allowing the SDR and the AE to work individually to say, okay, for me, I'll take it on the lower end of the spectrum. For this one, I'm going to take it on the higher end of that spectrum. So,
I agree with that. I think, and having that criteria set, it really starts with the leader too, whether it's your enablement leader or your manager, deciding what that criteria is and working with the AE as well alongside that on setting the standards, but not having too much either. I always say have 4 to 5 subsets of what criteria you need to have, like size of company or level of leadership that you're reaching out to, or industry, things like that are very important to who your ICP is.
And this brings up another point. Like, do you see this more in one spectrum of sales? Because when I sold, I had all named accounts, right? If my SDR got Sears, if I'm selling an e-commerce product on, I'm taking that meeting any which way, because I know there's a way for them to pay for this, right? Like we're going to figure it out. If they need it or not's another thing, but I want that at bat. In the account-based sales world, right? Like you have a territory of let's say 100 to 200, key people you're going at. Do you find this more in like the product-led growth, mid-market? Like let's dissect that a bit too. Or, I mean, I know there's fumbles and handoffs everywhere, but just based on the qualification part.
I think it's interesting because some companies have it where like an SDR can't even pass it over unless there's like BANT. Like, do they have budget? Do they have authority, need, timeline? Which is crazy, right? Because like an SDR called me out of nowhere and now, okay, fine, my interest is peaked, but like now you need to know all this other information from me. So I think it obviously depends on what you're selling, right? But when you're talking about like named accounts and even like territories, right? When SDRs are constrained to a bucket of maybe tier 1 or tier 2 accounts, like, going super deep on the ones that are really good, that you can tell these are highly qualified. These are companies that we want to talk to, and just going beyond the email cadence and the LinkedIn connections, like picking up the phone, doing whatever it takes to get in front of the really high quality ones and making sure that's a super, super smooth handoff over to the account executive to run the call.
I like that you mentioned like hitting them in different areas, because I think that is huge. Like when you're trying to get a hold of those high tier accounts too, like you should be hitting them on all levels, whether, LinkedIn, phone, email, connecting the dots, and then obviously, and having that criteria at hand. Also, the other thing I always look at is some of the criteria specifically, like the director level or above. Like I tell my team that's flexible, because if you can get someone who's a champion inside and start getting that conversation going and passing it over to the AE, and getting that going, there's so much opportunity that could be there, and they could be that champion to get you into that next level as well. So.
Yeah, and I actually think on that note, I think a lot of companies are missing out a little bit on the value that SDRs can bring to the table when it comes to data collection in a lot of ways. So for instance, when COVID hit, I saw the SDR, I saw companies slaughtering SDRs. Like they were just firing mass groves of SDRs because they were like, oh my God, our pipeline's not where it needs to be for obvious reasons. So let's double down. SDRs, why the hell aren't you getting meetings? Okay, you're worthless now. And in a growth economy, it makes sense. The SDR model makes a lot of sense because you can hire relatively inexpensive labor, you can train them up and they can become your AEs and go from there. But in a down economy, there's some economics that you just have to look at of the value of that role. If you just look at it in the singular way of generating meetings, right? Qualified meetings. But if you broaden the scope of an SDR and you look at them as kind of the front tip of the spear here and data collection, and you flip it, instead of having these poor 22, because first of all, going top down with an SDR model is kind of asinine at the end of the day. Like what executive in their right mind wants to talk to a 22-year-old kid wet behind the ears that's going to ask them BANT questions? Like it's just ridiculous in and of itself. Okay. So don't get me wrong. There are some SDRs that have balled it out and have been able to figure out how to do that and come up with a pretty good approach, whatever. But if you flip it on its head and you say, let's look at them as data collection and insights, and you start going bottom up, where you have the SDRs measured on how many connections on LinkedIn are they in that account every week? How many people on the front lines did they talk to, and not to get meetings with, but to gather insights from, so that they can then compile a story that the AE then can take to the executive level. Like that to me is massive value. And the other factor here is, what better group of people who are taught to go find information than to lead that back to product? So if I'm a CEO right now, instead of like surveying my audience as far as, oh, what do you want in my clients, and what's our product roadmap, I'm going to unleash my SDRs to gather that information. And part of their quote unquote qualification to whoever they talk to is going to be, hey, what are you doing here, and what about this? And so they can collect that insights, feed that back to the marketing team, feed that back to the product development team, and say, look, the market is asking for this shit. We don't have this shit. Let's make this stuff. And if I'm a CEO, I'm relying on that. But so many of them just looked at SDRs as, get a meeting, and if you don't get a meeting, you're dead. And so I'm going to fire all my SDRs here because they're not, generating revenue. And I think that's just a short-sighted, ignorant way of looking at SDRs.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And we have a question from the audience before my next question. Like, we're talking SDRs in-house, but what if there's like external SDRs? Like, it's potentially even more misaligned. And not saying that there isn't a use case for that. There absolutely is a use case for that. But like, how does that work?
Well,
like,
sorry to jump in here. I don't like the outsource SDR model.
Okay.
But guess what? Guess who has process? Guess who has handoff? Guess who has criteria? They actually do it far better than internal SDR organizations will. I just don't like it because I firmly believe you have to believe in what you do in order to be able to sell it or represent it.
Yep.
So I think there's something off. There's a mix there that you're representing something you really don't know anything about. But in theory and in practice, in a lot of ways, if you train an outsourced SDR organization the right way, they're actually better than it. And if you take out the growth path of an SDR to an AE role, it's actually more economically feasible, and it's a better model to outsource your SDRs.
Yeah, and what you said about process, like you said, like outsourced SDRs are typically following process better than an in-house, like because they're in-house. It's like things can become blurry. Like people can argue whether or not something was qualified. There can be this like internal type of just general tension. Whereas if they're outsourced, it's like, you guys follow this process, or we'll find somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
Those outsourced SDR teams too have the right tool set, not only the process, but the tool set. But it's a good way too to if you don't have an SDR team and you don't have the capability to bring it inside yet, start there, and you can then take that model and bring it in after too. So that's another nice point to that.
Yeah, and that actually answers Patrick's question there about when are you ready to bring an SDR team. And I think, it's funny, I was just talking to Mark Roberge on a podcast, the CRO, well, the original CRO of HubSpot. Yeah. And, he's got this product market fit model now and it aligns with what I think, which is, I think we're going back to full cycle sales. I really do. I think SDRs and BDRs are going to roll up under marketing, and they're going to be using all the tools and technology and AI to help bolster account-based marketing, and then full cycle sales all the way through. But what he was saying was that when you should bring in an SDR team is when you have product market fit, but you need your first sales reps full cycle to be able to go through that full cycle from prospecting to close and understand what the metrics are between those conversion ratios. And then once you define what those metrics are, as far as, okay, this is how many activities it takes to get that meeting. And of those meetings, this, after we demo and qualify, this is how many actually turn into a trial. And this is how many convert there. Once you have that full cycle with enough juice behind it and enough data behind it to say, okay, this is what it should look like, then you might bring an SDR in to then go on top of that. But it's not that, but the funny, and goes back to the economics of it. Now, if your AE quota is 100%, so you're doing full cycle all the way through, and you bring an SDR on, that doesn't mean that your quota doesn't go up. Your quota will go up. Like your quota should go up by 25% or whatever it is. If you're going to bring an SDR in, that's going to do that, but you should still be doing your own prospecting. And any AE out there that thinks they shouldn't do prospecting and it's just an SDR's job, you're a dinosaur, and you're going to get fired very, very soon. I promise you that.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's important that we're also like giving the accounts to the AEs to be able to prospect, right? Because account executives aren't prospecting to book meetings, right? They're prospecting to close deals. So an account executive is like, if I'm going to spend my time prospecting into this account outside of like all the other things they need to do, closing and following up, they're going to close that account. Like on our team for the self-source accounts, they have such higher close rates for the account executives. So I agree. Like the best AEs are prospecting and also like building their own pipeline. Marketing and SDRs should be looked as like supplemental in some cases. But yeah, 100%.
So we got the qualification down. I don't think we're fully done with it. And we could go into like, what are the logistics of the handoff? And then the second part of the qualification part, why I didn't say we're fully done with it. I mean, raise your hand if you've been qualified twice by the SDR once and the AE once. And there's kind of an overlap in some of the questions, maybe all of them. Maybe all of them.
Literally every question. And
yes.
and forget about bringing forget about bringing the engineer in who then has to qualify again. So that's why I personally think the predictable revenue model is broken, and it's gonna break. It's great for us as organizations to scale, because we bring in cheap labor and we bring them and we build whatever, but it's a miserable experience from a client standpoint. Nobody wants to be handed off 5 times before they actually talk to somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about. It's fundamentally flawed in the customer experience. And I'm on there with Drift and Dave Cancel that everything is commoditized except for the experience. And if you can't give that seamless, easy to buy experience these days, you're going to lose more business than you can possibly imagine.
Well, then your AE too looks like they didn't do any of their research prior to the call. Like they just jumped on and winged it, which is just poor overall for the company.
Yes.
From a buyer standpoint, I'll reach out and go through those motions knowing I need to. Let's be real. We've done a lot of research to get to that point. So I'll tell that person what I need, and you're slowing me down. How big are you? Whatever. I'm like, I'm talking to you, Chili Piper, because you all are great at this, right? I'm just giving you an example. Because you integrate with Salesforce, Zoom, all of this. I picked you out. You're awesome. Like, tell me what I don't know that could like put a cherry on top and help me implement this quickly. And let's just go back and forth on price real quick.
But Jared, are you the economic buyer? Do you have budget right now? Let me take a step back and let me walk you through my entire demo and presentation to show you every aspect of Chili Piper, because it's so important, right? Shut up. Just show me what I want. Now, I will make a point on this is there's the difference between a sophisticated buyer and an unsophisticated buyer.
Yeah,
what you just mapped out there is a sophisticated buyer. The corporate executive board, by the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% of the way through the sales process, blah, 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 right? That person, you need to identify how they got to where they are. And if they can articulate to you that I've looked at your 3 vendors, I know it, I just want to see this, and then I need to see pricing, you better show them just that. You better give them pricing or they will lose. They will bounce as fast as possible. But the unsophisticated buyer, the person that doesn't know what the person either was told to go look into this and is really just fresh start, or it was a cold call and I piqued your attention, that's a different story there. That's okay. Let me walk you through this because you don't even know how to buy this thing. You don't even know what this thing is. So I need to walk you through a little bit more. But I think that isn't talked about enough, is the sophisticated versus the unsophisticated buyer and how to identify which and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge stickler on discovery, and of course there is a difference between qualification and discovery. So even with the sophisticated buyer, as you described, John, like if somebody came in and like, I've looked at 3 of your competitors or companies that I think are your competitors, like I'm big of like, okay, we know their process when they come in. Like anybody who's interested in Chili Piper, I can tell you what their process is, but like we still need to find like some challenge that we can loop around, at the end of the call and just be like, okay, like we're, and then that closes the deal. But, there's a way that we can really condense a discovery where it doesn't feel like qualification part 2, right? But as everybody here knows, that we don't run decks and we don't run sales like John described. So,
But so many do. That's the point. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's this frustrating because again, I mean, there's example after example of I know what I want. I gotta, and you said it, Jared, like you have to go through this process because you know that that's the only way you can get the outcome. But you basically let them go for 30 minutes. You put it on mute. You check your emails while they're asking their dumb questions. And then you flip over to an AE and you drone through a stupid presentation because you have to. I mean, talk about a miserable experience, right? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It is laughable at this point how we are going through those motions thinking that that's the right way to do it at this point when the buyer has so much more information than they ever did.
I use it as a checkpoint to make sure like all my fears are integrated and I'm not getting frustrated and coming out because it's very easy to do that. But all right, so we're passing it on. Well, this is making a huge assumption that it's getting passed on, right? There's sometimes leads that come in and sit. I want to give the baton to Amanda. Like logistically, how do we like these are good problems to have compared to where some people are at. Like qualifying twice for some is a good problem. Others, 48 hours, 72 hours, nothing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things here, but if we're talking about like SDR to account executives specifically, I've seen it all. Like from a logistics standpoint, you've got the SDR and they're going to hand it off to an account executive. It's not always one-to-one. It's not even always like one to a pod. Sometimes it's like, okay, we have different regions, we have different segments, we have different industries. And then within that, we also have a round robin. So I've seen it all, right? I've seen spreadsheets. I've seen photos of like actual walls in an office that are like, you're kind of like sitting there trying to figure it out, you know, which AE I need to schedule it with. And then in the event that one of these SDRs kind of accidentally schedules it with the wrong AE, I mean, it's not good, right? There's that drama that we talked about. Account executives are getting upset because, you know, maybe they don't have the pipeline that they want. And, you know, even worse, sometimes there's favoritism on the team. So I've kind of seen it all.
Yeah, you definitely have to have that process in for sure. And it needs to be very structured on where it's going to go. I mean, I'm going to pitch you a little bit here. But we use Chili Piper. We've used other tools out there, but I will say Chili Piper has been just amazing. I think that's the one tool my team will not give up because it's been so seamless and they can book meetings instantly and they can do it round robin and it's simple and flawless and seamless that it makes their job more easy and more efficient. But one thing we do on the front end is before they get off that call, they are scheduling that meeting on the spot because that is a huge gap that we're seeing out there with so many companies is that, okay, I'll schedule a meeting right after this. And then they get delayed because they get pulled into something else. And then later on, and that prospect already has something else going on, or they totally forgot about the call 20 minutes later. So,
and you just nailed why most people cancel the next meeting. Because even like if you don't nail it down and right there and then summarize after the conversation and then prep me for it and then remind me what that next call is about, I know what my calendar, I don't know what y'all calendars look like. I know what mine looks like. It is back to 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 back, right? And I color code my entire calendar. And the vendors are gray. And so when I wake up in the morning, we use Chili Piper too, and I just give out my calendar and it's like, here you go. And so I'll wake up some days and I'll look at my calendar and go, holy shit, I don't even have time for lunch here. I don't have time to go to the bathroom. So the first thing I do is I scroll up and I just cancel the vendor meetings because I know usually they're a waste of time. Usually there's some kid who's going to ask me a bunch of crap questions and then throw up a demo of, you know, some slide deck that they're going to drone through. And I don't even really remember what the meeting's about because the kid maybe caught me 2 weeks ago and said, hey, and I said, yeah, sure. Send me a meeting invite for here it is, whatever it is. And so by the time I get to that day, I'm like, whatever, I'll see you later. But if they have the conversation with me, summarize the conversation, a nice little email, then send me a nice little agenda. And I know somebody asked Danny, you guys send out a calendar invite. Do you guys use a format and how will it look like? So I don't put the original agenda in the meeting invite because nobody looks at that. They just hit accept. But the day before the meeting, I'll say, hey, looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Here's a few things that that I want to make sure that we cover. Here's some resources if you want to take a look at those beforehand. What else do you want to make sure we add to that? Right. So I'm asking for your feedback there. So now that's confirming and controlling the meeting. And then the morning of is when I update the meeting invitation with the agenda in there. So I'm hitting you twice. I'm hitting you the day before, letting you know it's coming. So you remember what it's about. And I'm hitting you the morning of, and I'm not changing the time on that meeting invite. So when it updates, it's almost like this forcing function for somebody to go in there and be like, what is that? that's what this is about. Yeah, sure. Because if I can tell a sales rep has prepared for a meeting, I'm less likely to cancel that meeting. If I think this is just going to be a typical ask me a bunch of crap questions and give me a demo or present something, I'm going to cancel that meeting all day long.
This is massive for everybody listening, because remember, to complete the handoff, the meeting needs to happen. It needs to happen. So, we spoke a bit about the qualification and double qualifying. John did a marvelous job of saying a lot of these meetings aren't happening, and this is how to do it. Okay. And that's critical, because you could qualify right and do everything. And I've also heard advice, sending a video the day of. The point is, do something thoughtful that's one-to-one with the person you're speaking to, whether that's a video, whether that's an agenda. Like, know that you're speaking to them, and don't do it in mass, right? Although I bet even doing it in mass is better than not doing it, but I digress. So, I want to touch base on what Joey says. We've said a lot, but let's break it down. Let's give the folks some usable things, and not that we haven't already, but just what are the critical pieces of an effective BDR to AE handoff? And we've talked about some of them. I want to throw it to y'all. Let's answer Joey, and I'm sure other people's things, because this is all critical that we've done, but let's just show them the most critical stuff.
So one thing we've been doing is obviously setting that meeting immediately on the call. Following up right after. I actually tell my team to buffer in 10 minutes if they can into their calendar right after that meeting, so they can do that follow-up. We've been integrating video in too. We feel like that's been helping, and do the video, but then put your your points of what the next call is going to be too. So it doesn't have to be this big long email, but also you don't want a long video either. You want it under a minute. But connecting the dots and including your AE in. And then what John said, the day before, we do that 24 hours, same, set up the calls or anything else that you want to bring attention to or light of or learn more about, and then be ready for that call. We also have our SDRs join either the first half of the call with the AE to get them introduced and kind of set up the call.
Love that.
Or we allow them to attend the full, which helps with that career path too, because I truly understand or truly believe that SDRs need to understand the full sales cycle. And the best way to do it is have them be on those calls too.
And by the way, that's a earn factor there that I love, which is you're an SDR and your first job is just get meetings, right? And if you hit those metrics, well, now you can actually go on the first 10, 15 minutes to make that transition. And then if those go well and those are qualified, then you get to sit the full cycle and you get to listen and learn. And then, by the way, now you're fully ramped to be an AE. So congratulations. I have some other tactics, but Amanda, did you have anything that specific stuff on that transfer?
Yeah, I would say obviously qualification, super important. We already talked about that at the beginning of the session. I think communicating to the account executive, what's it about? You got the minimum criteria, okay, but tell me more. What was it about your outreach that got them to take this call? Having that in Salesforce so the account executive can see it, and doing an introduction email, right? Because it's just it can just be so disjointed of cool, I'm gonna put time on the calendar, and you two strangers are gonna show up, and it's like we said, it goes through that whole series of questioning again, and then also logistics and processes, right? We don't want to fumble that one part of just scheduling the call and making sure that it gets to the correct person. So yeah, I'd say those are the major points for me.
Yeah, and just two super tactical ones on my end, and it's kind of the connective tissue. You don't need any tools to do this. You don't need any fancy technology. It's the summary email and the shared agenda. So literally, just if anybody's listening right now, just Google Jay Barrow's favorite nugget. This is my favorite nugget. So the way it works is SDR has an initial conversation. Hopefully it's more than just, hey, here's what we do. Are you interested in a meeting? And there's some type of qualification in there, whatever it is about their needs and current situation. after that call, and by the way, you have to let the client know this is coming. You can't just do this afterwards and expect a response. You have to tell them. So it goes like this. It goes, hey, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate there's some next steps and action items here. I'm going to schedule these meetings up. Before I go ahead and do all that, though, I'm going to briefly summarize what I was able to gain from our conversation today. I'm going to send it over to you in a quick email. Could you do me a favor and email me back to let me know if it's all accurate and if I missed anything, right? So you tell them that. They're going to say yes. If they say no, I would wonder what the hell is wrong with them right there. And then for those 10 minutes, right? So to Ashley's point of scheduling an extra 10 minutes right at the end there, then take your notes. Don't write a book here. This is not a chance for you to reiterate your value proposition. This is purely to confirm what you heard from them. Current situations, this, timelines, this, priorities of this, whatever those 5, 6, 7 qualification criteria are for the SQL piece. And then what you do is you CC the AE. So, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, thank you so much. Below is a brief summary. Could you do me a favor and email me back? Let me know if this is all accurate. By the way, I've CC'd your AE here. So if you have any questions there, great. Then, because the SDR should maintain it until they show, then the AE flips over the day before the meeting and sends that shared agenda with the SDR CC to, hey, I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Below's a brief, here's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. Anything else you'd like to, and guess what's the first point on that agenda? Review the summary email to make sure that stuff's still all accurate and ask qualifying questions. So now it's not, oh, I'm qualifying you again. It's, hey, is this stuff still all accurate? Are these, and I have a few clarifying questions about some of this stuff as an AE, but we don't have to rehash that stuff because it's documented. And so now that little thing, first of all, shows the client that there is a transition in some way, shape, or form. That I'm already walking in with some knowledge about your current, and I'm being very specific with my questions, not just my general. So tell me about your business type of crap. That alone, right? And then, by the way, that summary email should be sent after that second meeting, after that third meeting, and after that fourth meeting. And then guess what? When it transitions over to the CS team, well, guess what? You have all this list of all the reasons that the client bought confirmed by the client, and that summary email can hold them accountable. So when they ghost you, you could be like, "Hey, what's going on here? Is this stuff still all accurate? If it isn't, let's get back on the call. But if it is, I'm going to push on you, challenge your sale, because you told me this was your priorities, this was your timeline, this was what's going on." So it's a simple template that anybody can put together that can standardize across the whole organization that solves a lot of problems, and it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It just has to be done.
Couldn't agree more. The only thing I'd add is pass along nuances, right? Like, okay, yes, all of these things are objectively there, but here's like the energy he or she had in this process. Like it seems like they got burned from the past vendor, like on the low. So like they're coming across as price sensitive. They're not, but like you need to handle that first, right? Like the nuances. They tried the most expensive, they got burned, so they're going the cheapest. They look at it as a commodity now, and understand these nuances is big. Also, like any engagement like outside of the professional world, like talking to John about Boston and the Red Sox, but more specifically about like nuances there, because there's nothing like getting along with somebody and then getting passed on and like not having that same positive energy. I'm just talking about like the human interactions, right? Like it's like, oh, I don't have that. Now we're just talking dollars and cents. This is boring me.
I think it's like a transfer of rapport, right?
A transfer of rapport, exactly.
We're going from one person to another. Like, let's maintain that vibe.
Yeah,
I will caution, though.
Yeah.
I'm going to caution
Please.
on fake rapport shit. Don't talk to me about the Red Sox. I'm dead serious. Like, hey, John, I see you're from Boston. Oh, those Red Sox. Piss off. I have no interest in talking about the Red Sox. You know what I mean? And you got to know, but that, to your point, is there should be a little mini prep call with the SDR. So that obviously doesn't go in the summary email. That's a side, hey, this is what we're getting into. Man, John's right in your face. Do not do small talk with him because he will cut your throat, versus somebody else who's a little bit softer and likes that part of the equation, right? And there's a hack for this. And I worry a little bit about the SDR making that determination, because there's not a lot of rapport building in that initial call with an SDR. That is not necessarily supposed to be very rapport oriented. If you can get rapport, that's fantastic, but that's not really you don't have a lot of time to develop rapport. You got to get your shit out. You got to ask a few questions and you got to see if there's worth taking that deeper dive. So I if I'm a senior AE, I got to be honest, I don't think I'm taking too much guidance from an SDR telling me how I should act in a meeting with a C-level executive. Like that's just so a hack for that. I'll take I'll say, how were they? Were they direct? Were they pissy? Were they mad? Were they whatever? But then I'm going to do my own due diligence. And that's where my checklist comes in as an AE of what I do to prepare for all those meetings. And on my checklist is I'm going to check out your social profile. I'm going to see how you are on social. I'm going to use a product like one of my favorites, Crystal Knows, which is a disc profile that tells me, is this person a high D or a low, a high I, and those type of things. I'm going to adjust accordingly. So I agree there's the softer kind of rapport component to it. I would just caution, because I see so many reps do the fake rapport building stuff, and it actually does, I think, more harm than good these days.
Fake rapport is not rapport.
Nope.
I'll say that. I got a note on LinkedIn the other day, like, "Hey, how are things going?" And I just responded, "Not interested," because it's worse. To your point.
So 2 things on that. We also use, you can use Gong or Exec Vision to allow the AE to go listen back on some of it. I think that's kind of important to hear the tone.
That's it.
If there's anything like, oh, they just celebrated this or this, some things just naturally come up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be good for them to hear that. Oh shoot, now I just lost my second thought. Darn. It'll come back to me.
But that's a good, the challenge that I always find is like the best case scenario is, right? We have that meeting, we do the summary, the AE can listen to that call, we can do a prep meeting for that, but that's just not reality in so many ways. So I think it's incumbent upon leadership to force that into the equation as far as, no, this is part of our process. You have to listen to that call at 2x. So it doesn't take you 30 minutes, it takes you 15, but you got to listen to it to pick up some of that sentiment. And you have to come up with a checklist of questions that you're going to ask that are not the same ones that the SDR asked or something like that.
The other thing I was going to mention that AEs so many miss this. And it's just like the simplest thing is go look at their LinkedIn profile, go look up their company, spend even if it's 1 minute or 2 minutes, like go do that and know something and connect with them and say, looking forward to our meeting coming up, because that is a huge miss across the board. Right? I see that all the time. It's
so easy right now to do it. You don't have to spend half an hour doing the research. Literally, like you said, you go on somebody's LinkedIn profile, you take a look at their most recent quotes and posts that they did, and a little bit of their background. And holy crap, you might find out that they used to work at one of your existing customers, and there's a nice, easy intro for you right there, or something like that. But the lack of prep for these meetings is insulting. That's why reps still say dumb stuff like, "Tell me about your business," or "Tell me about your priorities," or "What keeps you up at night?" My daughter, shut up. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that if you're not going to respect my time as an executive, I'm going to slaughter yours. Like that's just the mentality of most executives. I'm sorry. Like if you don't show, if I gave you my time, which is my most valuable asset, by the way, my most valuable asset. Do you think I'd rather spend 30 minutes with you or 30 minutes with my daughter? What's that? What's the answer there? So I'm giving you 30 minutes that I would rather spend with my family, my friends, my daughter. And you better come correct with not having to requalify me, doing a little bit of homework on me, asking thoughtful questions, those type of things. That's not as bad for an SDR, because I get it. They don't have the time. It's a little bit more volume oriented. But man, that AE, if you don't show up with some knowledge and some thought, prep before, this conversation is going to be real short.
Mm-hmm.
What can AEs be doing better in the process, right? Like we talk about SDRs qualifying first. Okay, we could, now I'm an AE, we can not qualify again. And I guess that's probably the manager to put that overview in place. But how else can we best support this, on the ground?
And this might be like going a little further than where you're trying to like chat about, Jared, but I think post-sale. So we've closed them right now. We're handing them off to CS or account management. Sure. And again, going back to that sentiment thing, now not for fake rapport, like you said, John, but like preparing the account manager, like, hey, this guy, Chris, he's like straight shooter. He's their ops guy. He's no BS. Like just, tell him how to do this, and this, answer any of his technical questions very confidently, and we'll be good. So I think there it's like on the account executive to kind of do the same thing that we want the BDR or the SDR to do for that post-sale handoff, because we can't forget, like, there's actually technically 2 handoffs in the kind of life cycle of the prospect and then onward to the customer.
Yeah, there's actually 3 sometimes because of the engineer.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think a lot of the process with the AEs really needs to start with the manager enforcing it and having that process set. And if they don't follow it, I mean, you have to follow, because guess who's hurting? It's hurting the buyer. It's not hurting. I mean, that's who's ultimately hurting, your prospect or buyer, or potential buyer, I should say. And I mean, I also think that having communication between the SDR team and the AE is super important, but I feel like you need the manager in there too, because it can't be like a bash / either.
Yeah.
So, but having that discussion and having it healthy and what's working, what's not, figuring it out, because not every process works, and sometimes it needs to change as weeks go on, years. And so.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's incumbent upon the AE to educate, right? Why was that a good meeting? Why was not just yell at me because it was a crappy meeting and they didn't show up to it, or it was a crappy meeting because I got my ass handed to me. It's like, well, why was it crappy? Well, because they had no idea what this meeting was about. You know what I mean? Because, they brought 5 people in and I thought there was only going to be 1 person in there, like those type of things. Because without knowing, and this is why I forgot who said, but like, I think Ashley, you're the one who said that it's important for an SDR to understand the full life cycle of a sale all the way through to customer success, so they can see and make the connection of why this is a good customer, because that's only going to do better to educate them on what to look for when they're prospecting anymore, right? I mean, it kills me when SDRs and organizations do onboarding and they say, okay, here's our ICP. All right, we focus on companies between 10 and 2,000 in these 3 industries, and here's your list of 1,000 accounts, go. And if a kid gets that, they're just going to rip through that list. They're not going to think about what's a good client and what's a bad. They're going to start at 1 and they're going to hammer through. And then we give them the persona, card of Sally. She's in marketing and she likes to be creative. So make sure you talk about creativity with Sally. And it's like, so all the kid's going to do is just regurgitate that pitch to Sally and not really have any empathy, understand what Sally actually even does, what the impact of their business is. There's a whole host of education that needs to happen for SDRs, in my opinion, to be truly effective, which is have them read case studies, have them talk to existing clients, have the AEs walk through a sales cycle of where it fell apart and what happened. All that stuff is going to give nothing but education to the SDR to then have a better lens of what to look for and then what to transition, because those are eventually, if you comp an SDR on meetings, eventually you should comp them on meetings plus, right? So meetings plus percentage of revenue. So you do quantity first and then quality as you go, and then you transition to that AE. You can't do that unless you educate them along the way of what is quality look like.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. When you have that compensation piece, does that help fix things from a managerial standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
I've been hearing that. I mean, compensation can definitely, just in our community and with the leaders we've been working with, we've seen a huge shift. Obviously, you comp on SQLs first, get them, building up confidence, getting those meetings set. But then, then look at more of that sales accepted leads and putting the heavier quote compensation or commission on that, the number on that one, because that's where it's going to really connect the dots and create more quality, which is going to make the AE so much happier. Also, it's going to make the SDR happier because now the AE is happy and everyone's working together as a team. And so.
Yeah, I just have so many thoughts on this, to be honest. Like, if we're comping people for like meetings held, meetings that were completed, like, okay, but like you said, like, did this enter pipeline? Is there a reason why it didn't enter pipeline? Do we have really like strict constraints of like what's something that can or can't enter pipeline? Is it just like I blew it on the discovery call, I don't want this in my pipeline? Or is it literally, regardless of whatever the SDR thought about this company, there's no way we can sell to them, whether it be about the price tag of our product, about the use case, about whatever it is that typically makes a good fit for a product. If they're not meeting a series of these like kind of like criteria, and they can't enter pipeline, there's nothing an account executive could do that's not a reflection of their ability to sell or not to sell. It's like, how do we determine these constraints? And then how does it affect commissions for the SDR? Because, well, they put the meeting on the calendar, the meeting happened. What does that look like for teams is what I'm really interested in.
Yeah,
I think a leader needs, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just think a leader really needs to understand, what do they want from the SDR? Do they want quantity or quality? And that's how you figure out how you're gonna do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure most of them would prefer quality. And if anybody out there is still measuring their SDRs on number of calls they're making a day, oh my gosh, change that immediately.
Yeah, I mean, at least after, I don't mind that in the early, like the first 2 or 3 months, just to get your ears wet. I'm going to give you a bunch of shitty leads. I'm going to let you make your ears bleed and tell you to make $50,000 just to see if you can do it. You know what I mean? To see if you have the effort factor, because what I can't teach on is effort. I can't teach effort. Like you have to be able to do the job, but very quickly, as soon as I can see that you're doing the job, then we're going to shift very hard to quality. But I also think that, to your point about the management thing, that this is why it's so important to have that criteria and the guardrails, like I said, because let's face it, there are some, just like, the premise here was, well, I'm an AE and I get shitty meetings set up for me, so I get frustrated at my SDRs. Well, the exact opposite I've seen quite a few times as well, where we got a killer SDR who gets great meetings and flips them over to a shitty AE who doesn't know how to run a meeting to save their life. And these don't convert. And all of a sudden they're complaining that the SDR's meetings aren't going into pipe. And the SDR's like, what are you talking about? Like, just because they can't sell doesn't mean I shouldn't get credit for what I just laid up there, because that was a prime account. The person seemed interested. Just because they don't have budget doesn't mean that was a that shouldn't be an opportunity for me. So that's why those guardrails are so critical, right? Because like, I disagree with BANT all the way. I just can't stand BANT. The only thing I care about with BANT is need, because the problem with qualifying by BANT is you're giving the whoever gets the qualified account, you're giving them an out. Because if I'm an AE and I'm looking for that perfect unicorn of I just basically have to send them a contract, but yet, this isn't budgeted, I could flip that right back over and say, it's not qualified. They don't have budget for this. And any sales rep worth their shirt, if there's a need there, should be able to go find budget for it. So that's where both sides need to be held accountable.
I agree. It's like it's a both sides thing, and then it goes into like, well, how do we communicate these things? Like, should it be directly from the AE to the SDR? Yeah. What happens when these are like hostile conversations? So, does it need to go through a manager, and how are they? But it all goes back to what you said, constraints, right? If we have rules in place and there are processes that have been approved by leadership, and there's no way that we can like kind of go around those things, it's totally objective. Yes. That's the best way. And ideally, like you said, when an AE can give feedback to an SDR of like, hey, this is a really good meeting, good job, like, based on what you found out about the company, like this is a slam dunk, versus like, hey, here's just a little bit of feedback on this company, versus it being like, this is DQ, why would you book that? So a lot of this goes into the relationship between the teams too.
Well, and Amanda, that goes into what is also drives me nuts about the fact that there's no standard for it, which is like the weekly meeting with an SDR and an AE. How is that run? Why isn't there a standard agenda for that? And that's one of the things that they should be covering, which is you don't do it after every meeting because that'd just be untenable, right? But once a week, when you sit down and you map out your strategy for that week with your AE and your SDR, one of the items should be on that list. Let's review some of those meetings last week. What were the learning lessons? This was a really good one. This one wasn't. This was, and this is why. So you can hold all that feedback for one instance. And so it's constructive, as opposed to I'm mad because I just got off the phone and that was a crappy meeting. So I'm gonna rip my SDR for that because I'm having a bad day and that was, and I was just off during that time. But if you constructively put it as part of the agenda, well, now all of a sudden it becomes an actual conversation where there's feedback and learning and all those type of things. So there's those two pieces. It's the handoff, but also the weekly meeting that those two should be having on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Whatever we do, we should be iterating. And I remember like it was yesterday having a list of like all the prospects that were passed to me, both from an account management standpoint that I'm going to pass this way to making sure that the handoff was made there, to checking in with the SDR and the others. Like if there was a no-show or something, like, hey, we're a team. How do we want to go and make this a show? Like, is that me going, do you want to finesse it? Am I finessing it? does it call for to both go? I don't know, but let's talk about that.
Mhm.
And in some cases, it's like, yeah, let's just both see who could do it first. But I love this, and this brings up a good point. So, like the weekly offline to review the handoffs, and then do teams have checklists of minimum requirements of info required before a handoff? And I think this goes into, Drew had a comment here as well, or a question: how do we prevent that accepted process from being completely subjective? So I think the checklist probably goes to that. I'll throw it out to y'all.
I mean, you got to know your ICP, right? Look at your customer base. Look at what's works, what's converted, what grows, and if it's like something that isn't even relatively close to that. I mean, certainly there's ways that we could come up with standardizations. Like, okay, based on what I know about this organization, or if you're selling some kind of MarTech type of tool, like based on what's on their website, based on the type of tools that they're already using, like. Can we even work with them? Like that's where it cannot be subjective at all. So really understanding your ICP and who you have had success selling to, and being able to translate that into guidelines that cannot, ever be argued.
I think there's so it's about documentation without question, but I go back to the guardrails, right? I don't think there should be one strict set of qualification. I think there should be guardrails of qualification, and then with almost like this checkbox of going back to ICP stuff. So here's all the characteristics of an ICP. Here's the technologies they use. Here's the industries that they're in. Here's the personas that we sell to. Like literally a checkbox of all of it. And then the AE and the SDR sit down, and that AE then tells the SDR, these are my checkboxes. This is what I want from me, because again, I'm relatively new. I don't have any pipeline right now. So I'm going to loosen up the restrictions here a little bit, but it's still going to have an absolute baseline here. But then it becomes this qualifying thing. And guess what? That summary email that I said about customers, you should be using it internally as well. So I sit down with my AE as an SDR. We go through this laundry list checklist of the things that you look for in qualified opportunities for me. I then take that document, I summarize it to you, and I say, hey, thank you so much for the meeting today. You said that this is what the qualification looks like. Could you please email me back to confirm this, to make sure that it's all accurate? And if I missed anything, AE then says yes. And then when the AE gets pissed off that they got a crap lead, the SDR can just forward that back to him and say, sorry, sucker, this is what you told me to go look for. If you want to change this, then we can have that conversation, but don't get pissed at me because this is what you said.
It's your paper trail.
Documentation. Right? It holds people accountable. Like if you look, I don't. There's a fine line between being direct and being rude. Okay, I think you trying to remind me what we talked about a while ago, I think that's rude, because I don't remember. I barely remember what I said 5 minutes ago. Forget about 5 days ago. But if you have it documented and I confirmed it, and then I go around that, all you got to do is forward that email back to me and be like, dude, and I'll be like, damn it. Yep. Okay. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like,
I always bring it back to management too. Like you have to create that make sure that good relationship is happening between the SDR team and the AEs. You are a team. When you work as a team, you work as a machine. You work well with your prospects. You work well with it. In the end, it just becomes so much better if everyone works well as a team. And it's not there's no I in team. We've heard that a billion times. So you got to, and again, with the manager, making sure that they understand the culture of the company and the teams too.
Yep.
Yeah, I think like you said, like the relationship of the teams, and also trust. Like trust is really important, right? Like we shouldn't be in this kind of situation where somebody is taking what an account executive said to an SDR and then utilizing that conversation as a reason to change qualification or change different processes. So yeah, trust is also really important.
And the AEs have to give the SDRs some slack. They have one of the hardest jobs. They are the first face that your customers or prospects are seeing. Mm-hmm. Holy crap. They have to make such a big impression, and they're getting you this meeting. Like, I just don't get it.
I have no idea why AEs treat SDR shitty. I really don't. Like, if you're going to come in and say, oh, wait a minute, John, I'm going to take the least favorite part of your job off of your plate, and I'm going to do all that grunt work for you. For me to be like, Well, piss off. It's not good enough. Like I fundamentally don't understand that mentality. I go back to full cycle sales. I think every AE should think of themselves as full cycle sales. And whatever you get from SDRs or whatever you get from marketing, that should be icing on your cake. But I'm going to, hopefully AEs are listening to this. I will tell you right now, as a former VP of sales and as somebody who used to hire a decent amount of people, the minute an AE would come into my office and if they missed their number, is if the words came out, well, I didn't get enough of lead, like before that sentence was even finished, if that's your excuse for not hitting your number, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Go find another job. Because I have no interest in somebody coming up with excuses of why they can't. So that's where the AEs need to treat that SDR as like, oh my God, thank you for getting these extra, helping me get my accelerators, helping me do all that other stuff. But I can't rely on that to hit my numbers here. So
to your point and building on that, you should be hitting your numbers yourself. SDR is the reason why you get to 120 or 150% of goal.
Mhm.
Also, as you're doing, your SDR is your chance to scale your territory. You have a second person. You're only able to do this much. Okay. Let's say this much is 200% and you're the number one person. You still have a ceiling. Your SDR can help you push through that. So let's say you're crushing it in meetings and your SDR is not giving you as much as you're doing yourself. There's two ways to approach this. One, let's not do anything. The second way is teach them. You teach them what you're doing. You're lifting them. You're lifting your territory. You're scaling your business. Treat this like a business. No I in team. Now all of a sudden you have 200. You teach them how to get 200. That might equal 400, but like that's welcome to President's Club, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, and John said earlier, I'm clearly passionate about this. I have a pipeline that's full. My SDR gave me maybe a not qualified lead. And this goes back to the team thing. Where's this SDR in their journey? If they're a newer SDR, take that meeting. I don't care how many. Sales is an emotional position. I don't think that's even debatable, but that's like an objective statement. Like it's an emotional position. If you could help that SDR with their ramp or get out of a slump, if they've already ramped and they're in a slump, and all you have to do is take it. And okay, if it's like completely off, like you could have that conversation. But if it's a maybe, and you sense that maybe it's not a maybe, but like from their point of view, take it, close it, keep them into all that. Explain why, next time let's get them out. Let's treat your territory like your business. And your SDR is your way to scale your business. Anyway, that's my feedback on that. I'm really amped on the team thing because use it to your advantage.
I also think leaders who are answering calls from SDRs, if they do a horrible job and it's just shitty, help coach them. I'm sure you want someone to do that for your team. Give them a little help.
You bring up a great point. Any VP of sales out there who picks up a cold call and shreds whoever is cold calling them can kiss my ass. Like your reps are doing what that person just did to you and you're shredding them. So you either can't tell your reps to go get more meetings and can't tell them that don't call, tell them like, you can't do it. Don't worry. Cause you got jerks like me and I understand, or you take that phone call and you take it as an opportunity to learn. Hopefully somebody had a good approach and you can maybe translate that to your team, or B, take the extra 5 minutes and coach the kid on how they could have done it better. Like this is a team sport. If you're an individual doing this, you're a jerk, right? Like you got to elevate the profession one step at a time at this point. And that's, it's, I think, incumbent upon a lot of us to take that extra step there.
I love where this conversation went. I was smiling halfway through because I was thinking like, if this ends right now, this will be recorded. I'm looking at Ariane to the right. You could literally look through this. There's actionable insights to revamp your whole program. And you have people in all different positions. John, the best at his game. Ashley, the best in hers. Amanda, the best in hers. Me just trying to be, happy to be here. Like there's some really, really good stuff here. Is there anything else in closing, we have a minute, and Jula's looking for one of those shirts. I would love one of those shirts too. Send me a Shopify form.
Yeah, this is actually my book. So you go to iwannabeinsaleswhenIgrowup.com, and then you'll see my daughter, then the book that we wrote. And if you're interested, hit me up on LinkedIn. And I think I got a couple extra copies of it, a couple extra shirts. So.
Yeah, and if I can just say, obviously Chili Piper sponsored this. We are a scheduling and distribution tool powering high-performing revenue teams like Square, Facebook, and Spotify. We're going to be following up with this with just some information about how you can really streamline your handoff process when it comes to routing and scheduling from SDRs to account executives. So I hope everyone who is here will take a look at that and come through. And if you find that your team is having some of these issues, that you'll check it out.
Yep. Bottom line, they can handle the logistics, and this conversation handles everything else. So together, we're a good team. Thank you all for your time. We're right at the hour. It means the world, and want to be conscious of that. The recording is available. Thank you all. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.